Welcome to my channel, Sella Buzz. When you stand at the top, the fall always feels further. Shannon Sharpe, a man once celebrated as one of America's ultimate success stories, is now entangled in a controversy that threatens to erase decades of hard work. From humble beginnings to NFL stardom, from analyst on Undisputed to hosting viral interviews with legends like Cat Williams, Shannon had carved out a space bigger than sports. He became a brand, tough, honest, smart, and relentless. For millions, he wasn't just a sports commentator. He was the voice of culture, reason, and unfiltered truth. But on the morning of April 21st, 2025, the illusion shattered. A civil lawsuit worth $50 million was filed against him by a woman identified only as Jane Doe. The accusations? Sexual assault, emotional abuse, manipulation, and illegal recording of intimate moments. Allegations that didn't just hint at personal failure. They attacked the very foundation of Shannon's image: trust, authenticity, power. The internet, predictably, exploded. Headlines blared across major outlets. Social media boiled with anger, sympathy, and speculation. Fans who once idolized him were left asking, how could this happen? In just a few hours, the narrative around Shannon Sharpe shifted violently. He was no longer the inspirational Hall of Famer or the viral king of sports media. He became something far more fragile, a man facing the full weight of public suspicion, and possibly the collapse of everything he had ever built. But what really happened? Was Shannon Sharpe truly the villain that the lawsuit painted him to be? Or was there more lurking beneath the surface? A complex story full of manipulation, fame, betrayal, and the brutal costs of living under constant public scrutiny. This wasn't just another celebrity drama. This was a legal war that could permanently change how we remember Shannon Sharpe. And today, we're diving deep into the rise, the fall, and the explosive battle that could leave scars no courtroom ruling could ever erase. Because when the lights go out, even the brightest stars can vanish into darkness. And Shannon Sharpe's fight for survival has only just begun. Before the fame, the accolades, and the controversy, Shannon Sharpe's story began in the humblest of settings. Born in Chicago, Illinois, and raised in Glenville, Georgia, Sharpe grew up in a world where nothing came easy. His family struggled with poverty, and every opportunity had to be wrestled from circumstances that seemed determined to hold him back. Shannon was the younger brother of Sterling Sharpe, another NFL standout, and the two shared a bond forged by adversity and sharpened by ambition. But while Sterling's path to greatness was more straightforward, Shannon's road was filled with hurdles. Academically, he struggled. Financially, he lived below the poverty line. In college, he played at Savannah State, a small Division II school almost invisible on the national stage. Yet none of that stopped him. Sharpe was built differently. His mix of relentless work ethic, freakish athleticism, and unshakable confidence propelled him where few believed he could go. In 1990, he was drafted by the Denver Broncos, and though many doubted whether a small school kid could survive in the NFL, Shannon had no intention of just surviving. He planned to dominate. Over the next 14 seasons, Shannon Sharpe rewrote the book on what a tight end could be. 8 Pro Bowl selections, 3 Super Bowl rings, over 10,000 receiving yards, and in 2011, the ultimate validation, induction into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. But it wasn't just his stats that set him apart. It was his attitude. Shannon was brash, hilarious, and sharp-tongued, a trash talker who backed up every word with performance. In an era of sanitized media training, Shannon's authenticity made him a fan favorite. When he retired from the NFL, many wondered if his time in the spotlight was over. Instead, it was just beginning. He transitioned seamlessly into sports media, first as a guest commentator, then as a host, and finally as a dominant force alongside Skip Bayless on FS1's Undisputed. His debates with Skip became legendary, not just because of the arguments, but because Shannon always brought a raw, relatable humanity to the table. He wasn't just analyzing sports. He was speaking to people's real-life struggles, victories, and heartbreaks. And then, of course, came Club Shay Shay, a podcast that blended humor, vulnerability, and cultural commentary in a way few others could replicate. Guests from sports, entertainment, and politics sat across from Shannon, drawn into conversations that felt more like therapy sessions than interviews. Millions subscribed. Clips went viral. And Shannon Sharpe was no longer just a football player or a sports analyst. He became something bigger, a trusted voice in a world full of noise, But in life, the higher you climb, the harder you fall. And for Shannon Sharpe, the fall began with one lawsuit, and accusations that threatened to undo a lifetime of hard-won respect. After conquering the NFL and making a name for himself in traditional sports broadcasting, Shannon Sharpe didn't just rest on his legacy, he reinvented it. In a world where athletes often fade into obscurity after retirement, Shannon pivoted into something far bigger than anyone expected, a media empire. And at the heart of that empire stood Club Shay. Shay. Launched initially as a side project, Club Shay quickly became one of the most influential interview platforms on the internet. The formula? Simple, but genius. Take Shannon's natural charisma, his sharp questioning, his genuine empathy, and mix it with long-form conversations with the biggest names in sports, entertainment, and culture. But Club Shay was different. From traditional interviews, it wasn't scripted, it wasn't overproduced, and it certainly wasn't polished for corporate approval. Instead, Shannon created an atmosphere that felt like a private conversation between friends. Whether it was a comedian like Cat Williams, a basketball legend like Shaquille O'Neal, or an activist speaking truth to power, Shannon made them comfortable enough to open up in ways no other show could. The podcast became a safe space, where guests revealed untold stories, hidden struggles, controversial takes, and the public couldn't get enough. Clips from Club Shay flooded YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. Millions of views poured in. Memes were created. Quotes from Shannon's guests started appearing in headlines everywhere. For the first time in his post-NFL career, Shannon wasn't just participating in the culture, he was shaping it. Brands noticed. Networks noticed. Suddenly, Shannon Sharpe wasn't just a sports analyst. He was a media mogul in the making. But this rapid rise came with a price. As Shannon's influence grew beyond the walls of traditional media like ESPN and FS1, whispers started spreading behind the scenes. Executives at major networks didn't like how much power an independent voice like Sharpe was gaining. He didn't need their platforms anymore, and that made him dangerous. Sponsors loved him, but corporate brands worried about his unfiltered honesty. Still, Shannon pressed on. He expanded Club Shay into merchandising, live events, and even bigger guest lineups. He wasn't just hosting interviews anymore. He was building a cultural movement centered on authenticity, resilience, and real conversations. The success was undeniable. The respect was global. The numbers were staggering. But fame is a double-edged sword. And while Club Shay made Shannon more powerful than ever before, it also made him a bigger target. Because in today's world, power attracts scrutiny. And when the lawsuit bombshell hit, Shannon Sharpe wasn't just another celebrity facing accusations. He was a brand, a movement. And the fall, if it came, wouldn't just hurt Shannon. It would send shockwaves through everything and everyone connected to him. The empire he had built so carefully was now standing on shaky ground. And as the lawsuit drama unfolded, Club Shay wasn't just a success story anymore. It became part of the battleground. April 21st, 2025, a date that would become a turning point in Shannon Sharpe's story. In the early hours of the morning, while most people were still sipping coffee or scrolling casually through their phones, the news broke like an earthquake. A civil lawsuit had been filed against Shannon Sharpe, demanding $50 million in damages. The plaintiff? A woman identified only as Jane Doe, a pseudonym often granted to protect the identities of alleged victims in sensitive cases. The accusations were devastating. Jane Doe claimed that during a private romantic relationship with Shannon, she endured repeated instances of sexual assault, emotional abuse, manipulation, and unauthorized recordings of their most intimate encounters. The lawsuit painted a picture of a man who, behind closed doors, was controlling, threatening, and abusive. The details were graphic. The emotional language used in the legal documents was powerful. Words like violated, coerced, and traumatized stood out in bold print. Jane Doe alleged that Shannon had used his fame, charm, and influence to exert complete control over her life, making her feel powerless to escape. Within hours, major news outlets, ESPN, CNN, TMZ, The New York Times, picked up the story. Headlines blared across social media. Shannon Sharpe accused of sexual assault in $50 million lawsuit. NFL legend faces career-ending allegations. The internet, always hungry for drama, exploded with hot takes. Some users rushed to Shannon's defense, calling it a money grab. Others immediately assumed his guilt, condemning him before any facts could fully emerge. It wasn't just fans reacting. It was athletes, celebrities, and media personalities. Some quietly unfollowed Shannon on social. platforms. Others tweeted vague comments about accountability and believing victims. The court of public opinion was already convening, and it wasn't looking good for Shannon. In the span of a few hours, Shannon Sharpe had gone from beloved, cultural icon to public enemy number one in the eyes of millions. Sponsors began re-evaluating contracts, collaborations were paused, phone calls that once came with opportunity suddenly went silent. But perhaps the most chilling part of the lawsuit was the suggestion that there was evidence. Jane Doe's attorneys hinted that text messages, voice recordings, and possibly videos existed that would substantiate her claims. Whether or not those materials would ever be made public remained a mystery. But the mere possibility was enough to terrify Shannon's legal team. The lawsuit wasn't just a threat to Shannon's money, it was a direct attack on his identity, his reputation, and his empire. The empire he had spent decades building brick by brick. Behind the scenes, sources close to Shannon said he was devastated, furious, scared, betrayed, but determined to fight. Publicly, though, he remained silent. No rushed Instagram Live, no impulsive tweets, just a chilling, suffocating silence, the kind that signals a storm gathering strength just over the horizon. The world waited for his response, and in the meantime, the story kept growing, fed by whispers, rumors, and the internet's insatiable appetite for scandal. The lawsuit bombshell had dropped, and nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again for Shannon Sharpe. Within 24 hours of the lawsuit breaking headlines, Shannon Sharpe finally made his move. Through a carefully worded statement from his legal team, Shannon denied every accusation, in full, without hesitation. The words money grab and shakedown echoed throughout the statement. Sharpe's lawyers accused Jane Doe of trying to exploit Shannon's fame and fortune, suggesting that the lawsuit was never about justice. It was about getting a massive payout. But Shannon wasn't stopping at just defending himself. He was preparing to attack back. His team announced they were filing a countersuit for defamation, seeking damages for what they called false, malicious, and reckless allegations. The strategy was clear. Shannon wasn't going to settle quietly. He was going to war. Sources close to him said he was furious, not just at the accusations, but at the idea that decades of hard work, discipline, and sacrifice could be undone in a matter of days by one lawsuit. Friends urged him to stay silent, but Shannon knew better. In the court of public opinion, silence often equals guilt. His countersuit was a declaration, not just of innocence, but of vengeance. He wanted the world to know he wasn't just fighting for money. He was fighting for his name, his legacy, and everything he stood for. But would the evidence back him up? Or was this just the beginning of a deeper downfall? Only time, and the courtroom, would tell. Just when Shannon Sharpe's legal team thought they could control the narrative, a new bombshell shattered their strategy. An audio recording surfaced, allegedly capturing Shannon's voice, and the content was deeply disturbing. In the clip, a man's voice could be heard making explicit threats, issuing dominating commands, and speaking in a tone that immediately sparked outrage across social media. The clip spread like wildfire. YouTubers, Twitter threads, podcasts. Everyone was analyzing the recording second by second, line by line. Some said it was undeniable proof of Jane Doe's allegations. Others questioned the context, wondering if there was more to the story. Shannon's lawyers moved quickly, releasing a statement claiming the audio was taken out of context. According to them, the clip was part of consensual role-play between two consenting adults, private behavior that had been twisted to fit a dangerous narrative. But in the court of public opinion, nuance rarely matters. The damage was already done. Sponsors who had been waiting for more information began pulling back. Some companies quietly distanced themselves. Others outright paused all deals pending further developments. Behind the scenes, insiders said Shannon was livid, not just because of the leak itself, but because he knew how it would be perceived, no matter what the truth was. The recording didn't prove guilt in a legal sense, but it cast a massive shadow over Shannon's defense. One that even the sharpest legal strategy might not be able to erase, and worse still, the leaks weren't over. The walls around Shannon Sharpe's empire were starting to crack, and there was still much more to come. As Shannon Sharpe battled the lawsuit and the audio scandal, yet another ghost from his past emerged. And this time, it threatened to tear down whatever defenses he had left. Old reports surfaced, alleging that years earlier, During his time at Fox Sports, Shannon had been involved in a physical altercation with a female production assistant. According to leaked details, Shannon was accused of choking the woman during a heated confrontation. The case never went to court. It was settled privately, behind closed doors. At the time, the incident barely made a ripple. No headlines, no media frenzy. It was, for all practical purposes, buried. But now, in light of Jane Doe's lawsuit, the past came roaring back with a vengeance. Commentators began asking, was this new lawsuit really the first sign of trouble, or just the first time? The public was paying attention. Critics argued that a pattern was emerging, one that couldn't be ignored. Supporters countered that old settled claims shouldn't be used to smear someone without proof. Either way, the damage was real. The narrative shifted again. Instead of one isolated lawsuit, Shannon was now facing questions about his entire past behavior. And in today's hyper-connected world, where reputation collapses faster than ever, it didn't matter whether the accusations were true. It only mattered that they existed. The timing couldn't have been worse. As Shannon prepared for the biggest legal fight of his life, the shadows from his past threatened to strangle the very future he was trying to protect. And the worst part? There were still bigger battles ahead. As the allegations mounted and public pressure intensified, all eyes turned toward one of Shannon Sharpe's biggest partners, ESPN. At first, ESPN tried to keep a low profile. They issued a generic statement. We take all allegations seriously and are monitoring the situation closely while respecting the legal process. It was the classic corporate response, cautious, non-committal, designed to buy time. But behind closed doors, the atmosphere at ESPN was anything but calm. Executives debated fiercely. Some believed Shannon deserved the chance to defend himself in court. Others worried that simply being associated with him during such a scandal could cause irreparable brand damage, especially in a media environment hypersensitive to issues of sexual misconduct. Insiders reported that several sponsors had already contacted ESPN, questioning their continued support of shows featuring Shannon. Networks operate on image, not just ratings, and Shannon's situation was quickly becoming too hot to handle. Under immense pressure, Shannon made a tough call. He voluntarily stepped away from his duties on First Take and temporarily paused production of Club Shay Shay. The official narrative said it was so he could focus on addressing personal matters. But industry insiders knew better. It was damage control, plain and simple. Other media personalities started chiming in too. Some, like Stephen A. Smith, publicly defended Shannon's right to due process. Others stayed silent, unwilling to attach themselves to a sinking ship. Meanwhile, fans debated endlessly. Was ESPN abandoning Shannon too soon, or were they right to protect their brand first? No matter how you looked at it, Shannon's world was shrinking fast. And as the walls closed in, the most critical battle was still yet to come, in the courtroom itself. The courtroom became the new battlefield, and Shannon Sharpe knew everything was on the line. In civil court, the burden of proof is lower than in criminal cases. Jane Doe's legal team didn't need to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. They just needed to convince a jury that Shannon was more likely guilty than not. A fine line, but one that could mean the difference between redemption and total ruin. Both sides came prepared for war. Jane Doe's lawyers brought forward text messages, screenshots, and emotional testimony about manipulation and control. The leaked audio recording loomed over the proceedings like a dark cloud, even though Shannon's lawyers insisted it was misunderstood. Sharpe's defense focused on consent, highlighting affectionate messages, mutual agreements, and attempts to discredit Jane Doe's character and motivations. They framed the lawsuit as a calculated attack aimed at extracting money from a public figure with deep pockets. In court, the battle was brutal. Every detail of Shannon's private life was dissected and debated. Every text, every call, every encounter, twisted and turned under a microscope for the world to see. And it wasn't just about the $50 million. It was about reputation. Something that, once lost, no amount of money can ever buy back. For Shannon, sitting silently behind his legal team, the stakes weren't just professional. They were personal. Every moment of humiliation, every accusation, every glance from the jury, it chipped away at the empire he had built with blood, sweat, and sheer willpower. The media outside the courthouse circled like vultures. Fans debated passionately online. Sponsors watched nervously from afar. No matter the verdict, one truth was becoming clearer with each passing day. This wasn't just a legal trial. It was a battle for the soul of Shannon Sharpe's legacy. As the courtroom drama unfolded, reality became impossible to ignore. No matter what the final judgment said, Shannon Sharpe's world would never be the same. Even if the court ruled in his favor, even if he walked away owing nothing, the stain of accusation was permanent. In today's media landscape, public memory is shaped more by headlines than verdicts, and Shannon's name was now forever linked to scandal. For many fans, the damage was already done. For others, loyalty ran deep. They believed Shannon was a victim of a system that destroys strong, outspoken black men when they become too powerful. Meanwhile, media companies quietly weighed their options. Would ESPN welcome Shannon back? Would Club Shay Shay ever reclaim its full audience? Could sponsors be convinced to reattach their brands to a man who had become radioactive? There were whispers that Shannon might pivot, launching his own independent platform, free from corporate censorship. There were even rumors he might transition fully into the world of entertainment and culture, leaving sports commentary behind. But one thing was certain. The old Shannon Sharpe, the invincible star, loved by millions, was gone. What remained was a man battle-hardened by betrayal, public humiliation, and the savage court of public opinion. A man who now understood that in today's world it's not enough to be right. You have to survive the narrative war too. So what's next for Shannon Sharpe? A comeback story? A tragic fall from grace? Or something in between? Time will tell. But one thing is clear. The fight for Shannon Sharpe's legacy has only just begun.